50 years ago, in 1966, Time magazine published an article about swinging London.
It was all about a new style of music, discotheques and mod fashions, and Carnaby Street was at the heart of it.
Carnaby Street started it off, and so you can walk anywhere now and wear anything you like.
Instead of being told what to think by your parents, you're now told what to think by the magazines and the movies.
London was being hailed as the most swinging city in the world.
Was the North East in on it too?
I can remember distinctly having some knee-high silver boots.
And it was quite the normal thing to do, was to write your own songs and perform them, in a band.
Was 66 all just about fashion and music?
The city was changing. Everything was changing.
Was everyone caught up in the wave of change?
All the family was in mining, so we just followed suit and went down the pit.
And did the 66 Cup final make people believe that anything was possible?
I'm going to find out what the year 1966 really meant to the people of the North East.
Newcastle was vibrant, dark and black, but vibrant.
Hairstyles changed, clothes changed, music, everything changed.
The heart of swinging Newcastle was here on Percy Street. Eldon Garden was built on the site of the old Handyside Arcade and one of Newcastle's most famous music venues.
He's a big shot at the club of Go-Go.
Typical night where I was going to go to the club of Go-Go, I'd take about 3 hours to get ready. It was live music, it was lovely, and the dancing, you could dance all night long.
Now they play the blues every day and every night.
Where the Go-Go was, it was like an arcade. It was above this arcade and you could walk around, and there was like shops started to open up there.
There was coffee shops in there, there was fashion shops, there was music shops. You met girls who looked really lovely then, and you felt as if you're part of a modern city. You really did.
All right. Yeah.
Two couples who were friends in 66 have come back to revisit a lost world. Having been knocked down and rebuilt, there's only a few small clues as to what was here before.
Really,
looks like the original metalwork.
That's definitely cast iron Victorian.
Even though it had a glass roof, I always remembered it being quite dark because it was so narrow.
Yeah. But it was a trendy place to be, wasn't it, Roger? I mean, you wanted to be seen to come in here.
It was different from Northumberland Street and the conventional shops and the department stores. It was quite different. Yeah.
So only young people went in there?
Yes. I mean, it wasn't the place that your mum would go shopping at all.
Older people would just avoid this place.
It was all clothing for young people who would come in, see the brighter clothing, but also different styles of stitching, and just like Carnaby Street, in London, same sort of idea.
It was all sorts of odd things, handbags and all sorts of things.
Second-hand records as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So 50 years on, and this is what it's like now. Yeah.
The story here began in the early 60s with a group of young musicians who were about to take on the world. Originally called the Alan Price Combo, they were a local band gigging all over town. It was during their time as house band at the Club of Go-Go that fame took hold.
We were sort of talent spotted, if you like, by a guy who came up from London to check us out. And Mike Jeffries, who owned the Go-Go and the Downbeat, realised he was onto something, so he immediately signed us up as management contract. Next thing, we had a record deal. But by that time, it seemed like anything could happen. The Beatles had demonstrated that a British band from the provinces could take America, and so anything seemed possible, really.
And take America they did, leaving a wave of optimism in their wake.
Because we were the first band in Newcastle who became internationally famous, and had hit records and everything. And guys that otherwise would have just been satisfied with playing in pubs and clubs in Newcastle suddenly thought, well, hell, if they can do it, why not us?
One band hoping to follow in the Animals' footsteps was the Junko Partners.
We were all starstruck.
Completely. Everybody wanted to do really
Definitely.
well with it, you know.
Oh yeah, we're going to make a record, you know, and that was the thing. You could see that you could make it.
They had taken the Animals' place in the Agogo and were still resident there in 66.
We used to often get billed from the same stable as the Animals.
Yeah.
I thought there's a lot of thought
was
gone
written
into that
down.
one. Yeah. There were so many wonderful people that actually played there.
Yeah, amazing.
You know.
Amazing.
Amazing to see those people in your hometown, actually.
I remember seeing the Stones, but I was as close to them as I am to you now. You know, there was just no separation, no stardom in that way.
Well, it wasn't a stage as we know a stage, it was literally just a step up, so there was, you know, you were all part of it. It was just about the dancing and what you were wearing and who was there.
And what were you wearing?
Well, I left school in June 66 and went straight into work in the bank. So for the first time in my life, I had some cash of my own. What we used to do, my friend and I, we used to go to the silk shop, which was opposite the Odeon, and buy a couple of yards of material, or even less, because the size of the dresses were ridiculously short. So Saturday morning we would buy the fabric, Saturday afternoon we would get the sewing machine out, and Saturday night we were wearing the dresses, which were about sort of this long.
So that's your pattern, that's your simplicity pattern.
Yeah, that's Whitley Bay on the links.
Yeah, but that joy, that joy and that freedom, not a care in the world. You've got now on your feet.
For me, this photo perfectly captures the spirit of 1966. Fashion, like music, was all about the joy and freedom of youth. Although I was only 5, I remember the excitement of me brother and sister buying new singles and rushing back to the house to play them. Literally, us stopping with the shepherd's pie on the fork just before it went into your mouth, with awe, as the new Beatles or Stones or Kinks or whoever it was went onto the turntable.
There was something in the air, I don't know what, I think it was just that we were the first generation that didn't want to be particularly what our parents wanted us to be.
The headmaster in my secondary modern did the rounds of boys and girls and, you know, asked them what their plans were for after school, and there was, I'm going to be a fit retournasaur, I'm going to be a pit mechanic, I'm going to do this. And he got to me and he said, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be a photographer. And it was as if I'd broken wind or something.
That was the usual story, you know. Shouldn't you get a proper job? You know, it's all very well this music, but you should have something to, a proper job.
Getting engaged and getting married was still on the cards, wasn't it? Do you know what I mean? Very much.
Because
getting engaged.
It was expected from your parents and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't the norm in those days. I don't think it was anyway, to be single still at 21. And I know my mother used to get approached by the neighbours. So you're not married yet.
I think parents just used to look at us bemused.
A lot of it was about money, actually.
Yes, it would be. Yes.
I mean, the fact they could never get... my parents could never get over the fact that actually I had spending money.
You could chop and change your jobs, and of course that broadens your outlook, I think, on life as well.
Everybody before us had come through the Great Depression before the war, and then World War II, and then the post-war austerity and the drabness of it, and everybody had to sort of just knuckle down and get on with it and la-di-da. And suddenly it was a time when we came into our teens where we thought, the hell with all that, you know?
Do you remember my mum? I bought a pair of Levi's, 501s, and the little red tag on the back.
Yeah.
She cut it off. There's a little tag on the back of your jeans, son. I've just cut it off. I said, Mum, what the hell have you done that for?
There was definitely something magical happening here in Newcastle. And it wasn't just about miniskirts and rock and roll.
The 60s said goodbye to post-war austerity. Doors were opening up. But whatever was going on in the swinging city, it was often greatly at odds with life at home.
Well, I think in those days what was expected was that when you were 15 or 16, you left school, got a job, and brought home your wages and handed them over. That was what was expected.
Olya Bowers was born and bred in Baker, a tight-knit community in one of the so-called slums of the city.
It was a very intimate community. I mean, it was great as a kid when you could run between all these doors because they would always have their door open, you know, the front door was always open. But I suppose, you know, there was the outside loo. Yeah. At least we had flushing.
But no hot and cold water, hot and cold in the house?
No, just the one coal fire. Everyone used to huddle around that, yeah. Now the wash house, that's where we used to come to wash all our clothes because obviously you didn't have washing machines at home. And you'd see women would come lugging big baskets full of washing. It was quite a scene, but it was all women. You know, they'd take a break waiting for the machines to dry or whatever, and they'd all start talking about their men and sort of raunchy stuff. Oh, you didn't need soap operas right then. The soap opera was the wash house, yeah.
In 1966, Olya was to create waves in her close-knit community by breaking the mould.
I really didn't want to stay in Baker the rest of my life. I certainly didn't want to stay on Shields Road, you know, working in a shop.
Volunteering with our local church, Olya went off to see the world and met Bruce, an American, who was to become her husband.
It's astonishing to me, really, how much confidence I had. I think it's the arrogance of youth or something. I don't know, I felt like I could do anything.
Before heading off for a brand new life in America, Bruce and Olya tied the knot at St Lawrence's Church in Baker.
He was totally enchanted by the whole biker scene, you know, the extended family thing. The Americans say, excuse me, ma'am, where's your bathroom? And of course, we had no bathroom. You know, we just had an outside loo. My stepfather actually rigged up a light in the toilet, and instead of having the normal just newspaper on a string, my mother went out and bought toilet paper for the first time. You know, my poor mum, when she got the news, when I wrote a letter to her saying, I'm getting married, apparently she went down to the auntie's pie shop on Albion Row, and she was hysterical, and they had to slap her to get her. She was so grief-stricken. It was just the thought that I was going to go all those miles away, although I thought I was just going away for a couple of years.
Were there other girls that you'd grown up with who moved away, got married and moved away? Or?
Not then. I was the first one. I was the first one to fall, yeah. Yeah, so I think my school friends thought I was a bit bonkers.
Olya left the slums of Baker for a new life, unaware of the massive changes about to sweep through her community. Slum housing and poverty were huge problems in Newcastle, and the 1960s brought with it a real political appetite to fix it. T. Dan Smith was a driving force throughout the 60s, and many of the changes to Newcastle's skyline took place on his watch.
Dan's vision was to get people out of the impoverished slums, and the solution was to build high.
In 1966, Shieldfield House broke the height record for the tallest building in Newcastle. I grew up in an old house, but I remember my friend at school inviting us round when I was a little girl to her brand new flat in the 14 stories in Wallsend.
Hello, John. Nice of you to have me in your home.
Not only did we get sucked up there by a lift, but when we went in, everything was uber modern, and our tiny little modern mam in our little modern miniskirt was standing cooking in this pristine state-of-the-art kitchen. It was like walking into an American advert.
Right. Is this your window on the world?
Oh yes, you get a good view. You can see Jesmond Dean on that side, and you can see Baker.
John Armstrong has lived in Shieldfield House for the last 30 years. Having grown up in the original Shieldfield, he has seen this community change beyond all recognition.
It was a popular area because, you see, Shieldfield was a village on its own, because, you see, there was over 100 shops in Shield Street. So, you see, They need not go outside. These are the houses what used to be built.
John, that's magnificent. This is Lord Armstrong's house, birthplace, present row, and this was in Shieldfield?
Yes.
And this was in Shieldfield? Yes. And you've crafted these yourself?
Oh, yes.
Although John loved the old Shieldfield, he understood why it had to go.
The situation's so desperate because of the slum living in things where there was 5 and 6 members living in the one room. So the high-rise flats was the only solution.
And these prefabricated units can be quickly assembled. In this case, into lovely homes.
The tearing down of old communities made rich pickings for drama.
Is replacing the old slums of the north with these fine streets in the sky.
The TV series, Our Friends in the North, drew on real people and events of the time. The fictional Austin Donahue bears a close resemblance to T. Dan Smith.
Now, why do I write about that? Well, because two reasons. One, the corruption scandals of the North East were largely about house building, so inevitably you have to look at that. The other thing is, I grew up seeing the effects of bad housing, and I saw a lot of real poverty and a lot of real housing poverty on my paper rounds as a 9 and 10-year-old. The thing that makes you adore Austin Donahue, and obviously made people adore in real life T. Dan, gives you that hope that the world is going to be changed for the better with practical outcomes. This is not, anything airy-fairy. This is building better houses so that people don't live in that awful, awful poverty.
What Peter Flannery wrote about in his drama was reality for so many people. Teresa and Doreen were among the first to experience the move from slum to high-rise living.
Can you tell us what it was like the first time that you saw where you were going to live? How
It was
you
like
felt?
Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, so
Well, it was, because you see hot water, bathroom, lovely bedrooms, electricity. But with the house where I left, still had gas.
We were sitting watching television one night and I says, I feel a bit dizzy. So Ronnie says, Teresa, it's the building, it's swaying. I says, what? He says, it's got to sway or it blow down.
Well,
They've
of course,
got to
what do you
move.
say?
The toilet was just going like that. You could have been sick watching the toilet.
We saw our old house getting pulled down, and then we saw my son, who was only little, sat in his high chair, and I think he watched nearly every brick being built in Shieldfield House. It was sort of like in panels, a great big high crane. But hey, it was interesting to see them, see them going up and you used to say, oh, there's another floor, there's another floor.
On the whole, the luxury of new housing like Shieldfield House seemed to be welcomed, but it did come at a price.
The defining feature of the tower blocks is it separated everybody, separated them vertically. I mean, of course it did. There are no streets in the sky, there are just flats.
A few years later, T. Dan Smith was caught up in a massive corruption scandal around house building.
When I rang him and said, I'd like to write about corruption in the Labour Party, what do you think? And he said, there is a play here of Shakespearean proportions.
What had been to some a brilliant idea was mired by money-making deals for the people in charge. The changes Dan was key to back then still shape our lives today.
A lot of his instincts were good. He genuinely had aspirations for the place, I think, but he went about it in a way that was bound to end in tears, and so it did.
While the city was a place of rapid change, out in the sticks, many communities were still rooted in tradition. Easington had a turbulent future ahead, but in 1966, it was in its heyday.
In them days, it was absolutely vibrant. You could go anywhere in Easington Corrie, you'd meet anybody, and they'd speak to you, and they'd stand and talk to you. It was absolutely brilliant.
Towards the end of '66, we used to go out quite often, and we used to go to the rock and roll Friday night every week, and it was something you really looked forward to, And it was like always rock and roll or the twist. We used to do the twist a lot. And you think, all them years ago, Go back 50 years, you know.
But in the 60s it was brilliant. I loved it. What was it? The bell bottoms started to come out and things, and I used to wear them at one time, and I just couldn't get away with them. Couldn't.
I had loads of miniskirts, just miniskirts and little tops, and the hair. We used to backcomb your hair till it was sort of like a beehive, and you'd spend 2 hours doing this beehive hair thing, and if anybody had put a match, you would have gone up like a bomb.
So it seems a bit of swinging London had made its way to Easington. But while most people in the region seemed to be searching for a better life, many people here felt they had everything they wanted.
We started at the pit when we were 15, out of our class, 15, 16, out of our class we went to the pit. And then we went underground. And that was in 1966. It was a good job, it was good money.
It was a good time. People had jobs, the shops were all open, people had money to spend.
We had no thought in the 60s of this closing down here. This was the best colliery in the northeast of England. I've been here since I was born. And I would never leave here.
Hello, Myrtle.
Myrtle Macpherson has also lived in Easington all of her life. Her late husband, Gordon, was a miner and a real pioneer. He encouraged his family to embrace the world and all it had to offer.
And my dad said, "You'll never go down the pit, son. You'll never go down the pit."
You went yourself?
And I went myself. I wanted to do like most people want to do, have a nice life and have a family. And never look back, I'll be honest. I enjoyed my time at the pit.
I think people imagine that by the 60s that the mines were all dead modern.
In comparison to when my dad was younger, they were much, much better. The conditions for the water suppression when they were cutting coal, so they were keeping the dust down so you weren't breathing in. You had dust masks and everything, you know. But it was still horrible to go down there. When you say that a day like today, a beautiful day, and you were having to go down that shaft 1,300 feet down. We were 6 miles out under the sea. There was 90 men in that cage. There was 3 decks, 30 men in each deck. So you could have 90 men coming down and 90 men coming up at the same time.
I think because you lived in the community, it was sort of inbred into you to go down to the mines, even though my dad didn't want me to go down because of what happened in his life and his father's life, cut short by the mines.
Always wanting to broaden their horizons, in 1966, Gordon's dad took the family on a trip they would never forget.
One day, I remember my dad saying, "I think we'll tour Europe, we'll take the car." And he says, "I've organised it all. We've got the tent at Dover, we picked up all the gear." I was the map reader because she couldn't map read. She sat in the back with our Gordon. And only got us lost once though, in the middle of Brussels.
Can you remember the Zodiac though?
Yeah, 249 AUP.
The Ford Zodiac, yeah, and it had a hole in the passenger side floor. And my dad got a tile off the toilet roof.
He did. Mm.
An asbestos tile, in those when nobody knew that in those days, and put it under the carpet in the footwell.
Rather unusual to
Very
go on
unusual.
a road trip to Europe in the middle of the 60s.
I think we had the unusual parents. When we won the World Cup, that was 66, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. And we were there and we were in a row in Germany on the border. We're at the border. So we sat in this traffic jam, red hot day, my mum and our Gordon in the back, me, map reader in the front, and my dad said, "We're all roasted and you were fed up." If you can imagine, you're fed up, but at the same time you're excited because you knew the World Cup was going on, but you were frustrated because you couldn't understand a word they had on the radio. And some young lads were in a car, and I says, "Excuse me," Germans, "excuse me, could you tell me who's winning?" "Germany's won, Germany 4, England 0. And we were all going, "Oh, we've lost." So on the other side, there was a priest, And he put his head out the window and he says, "You don't believe them?" He says, "England's won."
Third time, England had won the World Cup.
I says, "God, as if I catch them."
We jumped, didn't we? Hey! All shouting, yeah, and jumping up and down the seats.
And we were saying, what will it be like back home? I think they were the best years of my life, honestly.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
After the mine closed, Easington became one of the most deprived areas in the country. They weren't caught up in the whirlwind of change that other communities were during the year 1966. They were in a bubble that hadn't yet burst.
Jobs were going to be for life. The pit was going to be there forever.
But other communities were changed so much during this era that it makes you wonder if it all went too far.
Well, my poor mum, she was one of the very last people left in Byker. She was living in a war zone, really. It was all getting demolished around her.
I remember seeing the huge works going on. The past were finished with it, together in the new.
You know, you think Grey Street, how beautiful all that is
It
down
is.
there. There was loads of places were like that in Newcastle.
Yeah, true.
They just got bloody bulldozed.
Olia lives in Byker once again, but it's nothing like the Byker she left behind.
There's something like 28 languages spoken here. And I'm very happy. I'm happy with my neighbours on the balcony. I think we're building some of that spirit, you know, knocking on each other's doors. And I suppose I just feel, because I've lived in different parts of the world and I've come back, and there's something nice about being able to say, I'm from here.
After his years down the pit, Gordon set up his own health and safety business in Seaham.
I really enjoy it. As long as they go home with all the fingers, thumbs and toes on and go home to the wives and the family, that does me.
Gordon's moved on, but he'll never forget the trip his family took in '66.
Fantastic experience. I would love to relive it again, especially in that era. There was a sort of innocence about it.
I mean, I've always said I was so chuffed to actually experience the 60s. You know, because it meant so much.
I know people say that if you can remember the 60s, you weren't really living it. That's a load of tommy rot. If they can't remember it, they weren't living it.
I think we were the luckiest generation ever, you know? I still do.
We tore down, you know, the fences. If it's gone wrong, it's our fault. I know. We did it. I was there. I wanted it all to be brought down. I wanted to pull it down.
For many people in the northeast, '66 stands out as a time of real change.
Although we may regret some of the choices made back then, one thing's for sure. The generation that broke all the rules changed who we are forever.
Baby, do you understand me now? Sometimes I feel a little mad. But don't you know that no one alive can always